Hey guys, it's Alexandra, the blogger behind EyeLoveKnots.com and CreationCrochet.com. I want to show you 4 ways that you can switch yarn colors while you're working granny squares. And this video started off just by showing it in reference to switching at the end of a round, but at the end of the video I am including how to switch to your new ball if you run out of yarn during any part of the round. I'll pop the link to my blog post down in the description box below. I am going over the 4 ways that I personally use when I'm working projects. This is not the only 4 ways that it can be done. I change it up depending on the project that I'm working and how I'm feeling. I know that doesn't really help you exactly figure it out. I'm going to end with my preferred way, the best way that I like to do it for the most seamless look. But I'm going to show you the other ways too, and you can decide what works best for you. So let's go ahead and get started. I've just worked my last chain 1. All the join methods that I'm going to show you are going to start the same way. We're going to slip stitch join to the top chain of the beginning chain 2. Then I'm going to slip stitch over into each of the next 2 double crochets here. And I slip stitch all the way over in the previous color so that the color is consistent throughout the round. Alright, the first way I'm going to show you, insert your hook into the corner chain space. Do not complete your slip stitch. We're going to pull our new color through at the last yarn over. Since the slip stitch is a much smaller stitch, there's not much to it, so we've inserted our hook in there, grab the new color, put it on my hook, and pull it through. This is the last yarn over of this stitch. Pull it through to complete that slip stitch. Now I've just finished the round in the gray, and I'm ready to start with the pink, my new round. And I'll just work a chain 2 so you can see. Then for this pink tail that's down here in the chain space, I would just work my first corner over it, and as you work over that tail end, holding it to the back of the chains, and it will cover up the whole entire thing. I have 1 stitch left of this corner. I'm going to drop that tail end, work my last stitch, and pull up a loop. And now that pink tail is hidden and you've worked in your new color. You can see this loop right here is visible. After you work your last cluster here and you join, it's going to have this little sliver of color over your pink. So this is the reason why I do not use this join method very often, but it is probably the most common way to change colors, not in the granny square pattern but in crocheting in general. You can tug on that gray and that loop will go down so it's not quite as visible, but now you can see up close, you can see the pink strand on the bottom, the gray strand in the middle, and then the pink stitches above it. And for the tail, the reason why I leave off the last stitch is so that when I go to weave in my ends, I can go through that last stitch and into the bulk of that corner. Alright, that's way number 1. For way number 2, I'm going to slip stitch into the corner chain space as normal with my gray. I've just completed the entire row there and slip stitched all the way over. Grab my new color now, put it on my hook, pull it through that loop, then pull down on the gray yarn so that loop disappears. And now I'm ready to start with my pink. Chain 2, and I will work over both tail ends here for this corner. just inserting my hook into that chain space as normal and crocheting over the chains and both tail ends. And I do it the same way. I've worked up to the last stitch, dropped the tails, and then worked my last double crochet, and that's for weaving purposes. Now this is probably my second favorite way to do it. I'm tugging on that gray yarn, and you can see that that gray loop has disappeared. The one that you had on your hook, we pulled it down and it has now disappeared. This is actually the way that I do it in a lot of my projects because it gives me the most seamless color change. The only thing here that is the reason why it's not my go-to number one is because you've still changed colors up here in this gray stitch, whereas all the rest of your stitches have been worked into the corner chain space itself. So there's a little tiny gap there where you see the gray yarn and then your stitches start. If I was going to carry my yarn up the square, I would use this method. Because I'm not going to be fastening off my yarn, I'm going to be carrying it up the back, so I won't be able to join completely to this chain space. So I would use this method for the most seamless color change. I have not been changing colors at the end of each round. I strategically did it in this granny square here so that there's 2 spaces, 2 spaces, 3 spaces, 3 spaces. And I carried up my yarn on the back. I stopped doing it after a few squares of this because it became a problem. Looking at the back of your square, you have this yarn running up and it sticks out like a sore thumb. So if you were going to change colors every single round, your carry would be less noticeable. But because I did it with so much gap in between, it is very noticeable on the back. And it posed problems for me at the end when it came to assembly and gifting. Unless you don't mind having this as the back. It does work. The carrying method does work sometimes. It just didn't work for me in this particular project. But if I was going to carry my yarn up, then I would use this method. I would not crochet over my tails. I would just drop the tails. I would come here to the chain 2. I would push those tails to the back so I don't work over them. And then I would work my first corner here. And that would be so that when I come around after the last cluster and join, they're right there where I need them to carry up. Okay, that is number 2. This is my second favorite method, and this is what I use when I carry up my yarn. Number 3. I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch as normal into the chain space and fasten off my yarn. Pull up on the loop to break it and grab my new color. Make a slip knot. Put the slip knot on my hook. Then holding the yarn tail at the bottom and my working yarn over my fingers, I'm going to hold the loop on my hook with my right hand, yarn over, so there are 2 loops on there, then grab my granny square, go to that corner, insert my hook into the chain space, yarn over and pull through. That gives me 3 loops on my hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. It kind of moves around on you, so just be careful there. And then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. That gives you a double crochet there. and then continue on working your corner here, working over your gray tail to hide it. And I'm going to do the same thing. I've worked just the last two, drop the tail end, work the third one, pull up the loop there. And I do that so that I can go into that last stitch for weaving purposes. But by working over that tail end, I feel like it gives you a much smoother transition here. And you've worked every stitch into the chain space itself, so the stitching is even. And it actually gives you a better looking stitch here as the first stitch instead of the chain 2. You get an actual double crochet that is equal to all the rest of the stitches. And when you come around, you finish your last cluster, chain 1, you slip stitch join into that very first double crochet. The only reason why I don't use this method very much is because when I'm not changing colors, then I'm using a chain 2, so the look is different between the two. That's the only reason why this is a really great way to tie on your yarn. Alright, my preferred method, number 4. Starts the same way. I worked over into the chain space, I fastened off my yarn, and then pulled up on that loop, and I have the tail end here. Alright, take my crochet hook, insert it into the chain space corner, and this can be any corner, it doesn't have to be this one that we just fastened off, but that's where I always go. So I'm inserting my hook, grab my yarn and pull it through, all the way through. Then leaving a tail end I can comfortably weave in here. I'm going to just tie like the first part of a knot. Not a full square knot where I would tie it again, just one tie. And then pull the tails to the left side, insert my hook into that chain space again, yarn over and pull through, and then start with my chain 2. Then work over the tail ends. Not working over them for the very last stitch as I have done with all the rest of the methods, and that's for weaving purposes. And you have the same look as what we did in number 3, but you start with a chain 2 that matches all the rest of the rounds. And I love this method for granny squares because all the stitches are worked into that chain space, so they all match. So if I'm not carrying up my yarn up the back of my square, this is how I change my yarn colors. The way that you change your yarn color is completely up to you, so whatever works best for you. If you use a different method, drop me a line below and let me know, I'm interested. Or if you use one of the methods that I use, let me know that too. Alright, now that I've started in this pink color, I'm going to go ahead and finish working all the way around, and then I'm going to change back to gray. I've gotten to the end of this round. I finished my last cluster, chained 1, now I'm going to slip stitch join and slip stitch over into the chain space, and then fasten off my pink color. Pull up on the loop to break it, and then I'll go back to my gray yarn. Insert my hook into the corner chain space, pull the tail end through, then tie a knot, move the tails to the left side, insert my hook back in, yarn over and pull through, and then chain 2, and I'm ready to go with the gray again. Now I'm about to run out of gray yarn, so I'm going to be showing how to change yarn colors in the middle of the granny square. We're going to go back to that first method that I showed you of changing the yarn, where we do it in the last yarn over of the previous stitch. So here we're working double crochets, so we'll work the first half, yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, leaving 2 loops on your hook, and we're going to pause here because this is the last step of the stitch. Grab our new ball, make a loop, leaving a tail end long enough to comfortably weave in. Put that loop on your hook, and this counts as the last yarn over. Then pull it through the 2 loops that were on your hook, and that completes the stitch. Then I just go to my tails and I tighten them down so that that stitch goes to normal tension. Drop the tails to the back, and then with my new ball, work my next stitch. In this case, it's the 3rd double crochet of this cluster. And now you just continue working your stitches as normal in your new ball, and later on when you go back to weave in your ends, then you just take care of those 2 tails. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. You'll find the tutorial for this linked in the description box below, as well as some granny square projects. Please smash that like button and hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.